What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about the UK Constitution. Here in America, we are very proud of our Constitution, and it is defined as the supreme law of the United States. And it basically spells out how America is supposed to be governed. But I realize that I have no idea about the UK Constitution and how it works, how it's written. I've never heard anything about the UK Constitution. So today, I want to check out this video that is going to teach me all about the UK Constitution and how it works. So, with that being said, let's take a look.
There might be some confusion about whether or not the UK has a constitution. So we thought we'd make a video to clear that up for you.
What? Huh? There's some confusion over whether the UK has a constitution? What does that mean? There's no constitution, or there is, or I'm already confused. Okay.
While it's true that the UK doesn't have an explicit, written constitution with a capital C,
What?
like the US for example, the UK does have an unwritten or uncodified constitution.
Huh? This is not what I was expecting. This is not how I expected this to go. I thought it was just going to explain the Constitution, but there is no Constitution. Or excuse me, there is a Constitution. It's uncodified. What does that mean? Well, from what they're saying, it means it's unwritten? What do you mean there's no written constitution? Isn't that supposed to kind of spell out, in legal terms, really, how the government is supposed to work, how some of the laws are supposed to work, and how the country is supposed to be ran? Isn't that pretty important? Like, I'm not sure what this all means. Let's keep going.
This is relatively rare in modern politics.
Yeah.
Only the UK, Israel, Saudi Arabia, New Zealand and Canada have uncodified constitutions.
Really? I had no idea this was even a thing. I mean, maybe that's like the American side of me showing here. Like, I just thought, hey, we have a written constitution. That must be how you do it. But it's like, no, I guess not. There's apparently several nations around the world that have an uncodified constitution. I didn't even know that was a thing.
And the last two only have uncodified constitutions because they used to be British colonies, and so their political systems are based on the UK system.
Right.
The UK's constitution draws from four main sources: statute law, common law, works of authority, and conventions.
Okay.
Statute law is probably the most important part of the UK's constitution. Statute law refers to acts passed by Parliament. Not all acts passed by Parliament are constitutional. Generally only those that affect how Parliament or the judiciary function, or the ones that affect the relationship between the individual and state, are considered constitutional.
What on earth? This is also extremely dense information, which I wasn't expecting. Okay, so far, it's broken up into 4 different parts.
Authority and conventions.
The UK Constitution, it's uncodified. I mean, uncodified, but it has to be coded somewhere. This has to be written down somewhere. There's all these rules and stuff. Like, there's 4 different parts. Statute law, common law, works of authority, conventions. There is a constitution, clearly, of the UK. It's being explained to me right now, but where is it, like, written down? Is it not on, like, an old piece of parchment or something?
Statute law is probably the most important part of the UK's constitution.
Okay, and I also need to listen to some of this again, because I'm not sure I understood what on earth we're talking about with the statute law, even though I just heard it.
Statute law refers to acts passed by Parliament.
Okay.
Not all acts passed by Parliament are constitutional.
Not all this I didn't pause it before, but not all acts passed by Parliament are constitutional? What does that mean? Like, they're against the law? Or that's in the United States, and that's all I have to go off of. If something passed that was unconstitutional, that'd be a big problem. That would mean like it's against the law. So what does this mean in the UK?
Generally, only those that affect how Parliament or the judiciary function, or the ones that affect the relationship between the individual and state, are considered constitutional.
Okay. Laws that affect people and the government are considered constitutional.
A recent example of such an act might be the Constitutional Reform Act. There's a clue in the name there. Which passed through Parliament in 2005, creating the UK's Supreme Court. Now, we don't want to get too bogged down.
There was no UK Supreme Court as well till 2005. Like just 20 years ago. This is really, really interesting. It's interesting for me to also compare it to the United States as well, the stuff I'm familiar with. There's a lot of stuff about the UK government I had no idea. There was no Supreme Court till 20 years ago.
Down in any legal stuff, mainly because no one at TLDR News is a lawyer. But this concept has been recognised in UK law. In 2002, in the famous Metric Martyrs case, Lord Justice Laws, the judge who was ruling on the case, declared that certain acts, namely the Parliament Act and the Human Rights Act of 1998, were constitutional statutes, which could not be implicitly repealed by a new law that contradicts them.
So they were trying to decide if certain laws are constitutional, which would mean that they can't easily be changed, if I understand correctly.
A similar thing happened in 2012, when Lord Hope, ruling on a different case, held that the Scotland Act can only be expressly repealed. It cannot be impliedly repealed. That is because of its fundamental constitutional nature. Implicit repeal is when an older act is effectively ignored once a newer one passes through Parliament and contradicts the old act. The old law doesn't have to actually be repealed in parliamentary time, and is just ignored in the future, or implicitly repealed.
Interesting. So it's actually really important to determine if certain acts and laws passed by Parliament are constitutional or not, because that determines how easy or difficult it is to repeal these acts in the future. If they're constitutional, it's very difficult to have them repealed. Interesting. I'm basically having to think of the definition of constitutional a little differently, because it seems to be used a little differently in the UK.
On to the next source of the Constitution, common law, also known as case law.
Okay, so maybe...
On to the next source of the Constitution.
Maybe the UK Constitution isn't written down explicitly, but these 4 different categories that comprise the UK Constitution, these are what you go off of. These basically create the UK Constitution unofficially, I guess, is these 4 different things. Okay.
Common law, also known as case law. This refers to legal precedents created in particular cases that are not enshrined in statute law. A good example of this is the infamous Factor Tame case. This is when Spanish fishermen brought a case against the UK Parliament, who were demanding that ships in UK water had to have majority British owners. The European Court of Justice ruled that this Act of Parliament contravened EU law, and therefore had to be suspended, setting the precedent that the EU's law superseded UK law.
Wow.
Alright, so if you're still with us, the next source of...
They're literally talking straight to me. Like, if you're still with us, if you still understand. Sort of. I'm not going to lie. I don't understand everything that's being said here. I appreciate they have little examples and stuff, though. Let's keep going.
The Constitution are works of authority. These are well-known constitutional books or documents, such as Bagehot's The English Constitution, the Magna Carta, and A.V. Dicey's Introduction to the Study of the Law and the Constitution.
Okay, this makes sense to me. This is something that comprises the UK Constitution. So, works of authority. So there's an English Constitution, by the way, apparently. There's an English Constitution. Is there like a Scottish Constitution, Welsh, Northern Ireland? Do they all have individual constitutions? And maybe there's no grand, unified UK Constitution? It's kind of like the combination of all this stuff, really. But the UK Constitution is based off of a lot of these works These are like, yeah, documents and historical precedents and the Magna Carta, this long constitution book, and the English Constitution.
which introduce the concepts of parliamentary sovereignty and rule of law. These are not legally binding, but often hold huge political weight, and as
See, that's interesting right there. These are not legally binding. They just hold a large amount of political weight. In here in the United States, like the Constitution is extremely politically binding. It's literally words written down and it's called the Constitution of the United States. There's no ambiguity, which I think I like in the sense that you can just go to the US Constitution and look up things and know exactly how stuff works. Or if people in politics or law are trying to make a decision, they can just go to the Constitution and read it. But in the UK, it's a little more ambiguous, a little more like you got to look at a whole bunch of things, and it's not crystal clear to me anyway. If it's easy to find a direct answer, if that makes any sense.
historically shaped the way that the UK's political system has developed. The most recent candidate for a work of authority is the Cabinet Manual, written by Gus O'Donnell while he served as Cabinet Secretary,
Wow.
the highest post in the civil service.
So someone in the UK, especially in politics, can just write a document or a book, and it can be considered to be added to the UK Constitution, basically. That's interesting.
In 2010. It sets out the main laws and conventions which affect how the government operates. We've left a link to the PDF in the
Okay.
description below if you want to check it out.
This basically tells how the UK government operates. I mean, in a way, especially with these works of authority, this category of the UK Constitution, this is the most concrete set of rules that are actually written down on paper that I can kind of understand as being the Constitution in like a physical way.
Now for conventions. The Cabinet Manual we just mentioned describes conventions as rules of constitutional practice that are regarded as binding in operation but not in law.
Binding in operation, but not binding in law. That's what I mean with, like, some of this stuff sounds, I don't know, flexible? Like, it's not binding in law? Let's keep going.
Despite the fact there's no legal punishment for breaking a convention, they are almost always adhered to by politicians.
Okay.
There are lots of constitutional conventions, some of which you'll never need to know or hear of.
So, these are like traditions. These are widely accepted in UK politics as conventions that you need to adhere to, and everyone usually does, but it's not explicitly required by law that you follow these conventions, which is a little strange to me. It's kind of based more on tradition.
But there are some main ones. The Salisbury Convention is the convention that the Lords don't block bills that were in the party's manifesto. This convention was created after Labour's landslide in 1945. When Labour won that general election, only 16 of the 761 peers sitting in the House of Lords were Labour affiliated. So the massive Conservative majority could effectively block any legislation it felt like blocking. Lord Salisbury, the Conservative leader in the House of Lords, recognised how ridiculous this situation would be, and agreed that the Lords wouldn't block any legislation laid out in Labour's manifesto.
Really? This is really, really interesting stuff, actually. In a sense, I kind of like it. It's kind of cool how some of the way that UK politics works is just based on, like, honor and, like, tradition and being like, hey, out of respect, we're not going to block the, what was it, the Labour Party from passing things in their manifesto?
It used to be that the power to declare war or take military action was solely in the hands of the Prime Minister. In 2003, Tony Blair did ask for Parliament's approval before he went to war in Iraq, but he made it clear that he was probably going to do it anyway, because he had the royal prerogative to do so. In 2000,
So as like a sign of respect, some of this stuff is also just based on respect as well. the Prime Minister asked Parliament, hey, should we go to war? Even though he was going to do it anyway, it was respectful to ask, but not required by law.
2007, after the Iraq War hadn't gone all that swimmingly, Gordon Brown decided to set a new convention that the government requires the backing of Parliament before it can declare war or engage in significant military action. You might now see why some people get a bit worried about an uncodified constitution.
Yeah, now I understand, I think, what uncodified constitution means. It's a constitution made up of a lot of different works and laws and conventions and ways of doing things, and all of that added together makes the rules of the UK, the Constitution. But it's not like one big manual or book that says UK Constitution written on it, like here in the United States. So that's what I had to wrap my head around.
It's held together by conventions that can be broken, acts of parliament that can be repealed or changed,
Right.
and some ancient books that don't actually have any legal weight.
Right.
So what's to stop some tyrannical government from flipping all of this on its head and turning the UK into some totalitarian dystopia? Well, legally nothing, to be honest.
That is scary, but fascinating. Like, I don't know what other word to use. It's so interesting. There is really no UK Constitution, singular document that says you can't do things a certain way. It's all based on precedent and tradition, and I mean some laws, and I don't know. What do people in the UK think about this? I guess it's never really been a problem up till now, has it? So I guess it's fine. It works.
But this never seems to happen, touch wood. There are enough checks and balances along the way, and conventions and so on hold enough political weight to prevent a complete upheaval.
Right.
In fact, when you look around the world, having an uncodified constitution that's flexible to change and allows for organic modernization might actually be an advantage.
I was just about to say, from what they're saying here, the one thing about this that's really nice is it is very flexible. There's no hard, fast rules. I mean, there are, but there aren't. So you can adapt. You can be flexible. You can change things as time goes on and as you see fit. Good luck trying to change the United States Constitution. It's not going to happen. It might as well be a holy document as far as we're concerned. Which, is good in that we know what the rules are, but bad in the sense that sometimes you don't want to follow certain rules and procedures that were laid out hundreds of years ago that don't really apply to the modern day. Sometimes you want to change things in a better way, and that would be nearly impossible to do in the United States with our Constitution. So that's a really big advantage of this uncodified Constitution.
The UK doesn't have any insane, outdated rules that are constitutionally entrenched, and we don't have an unelected judiciary making important constitutional or political decisions.
Right.
Anyway, that tops it off for this video.
Wow. That was so interesting. That was not what I was expecting either. No Constitution? I wanted to learn about the UK Constitution, and the first thing is, there is none. But there is. This video was by TLDR News, and I gotta give it a like. They did a very good job of explaining a topic that was kind of, complicated, especially for me as an American. I've never heard of this. Americans have no idea that there's another way of doing things. And I think that's what I love most about learning about this. The UK Constitution, fascinating. And it has, I guess it's pros and cons, just like the American Constitution. I just think it's so cool that there's another way of doing things that works well, that I had no idea about. So I really enjoyed this. Anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on the UK Constitution. That'd be very interesting to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to the UK and UK culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.